I actually put this down. I think, did you beat Leicester at the end of November? Is that right? You beat Leicester 2-1.
Yeah.
And there were a few results in the old title race that kind of swung your way. And I think we genuinely did a show after that where I asked you whether they were in the title race, and you didn't quite say yes, but you were edging towards it. And then since then, it's just kind of the wheels have kind of come off.
No, but when we discuss the title race, like, firstly, a fan's perspective should be different to a manager. But there was certainly a time when I was saying that we are in a title race. There's certainly a time when everybody associated with Chelsea Football Club, in my opinion, should have been saying that we are in a title race. Because we should be, the standard should be that we are always competing. And I don't think it's necessarily in keeping with Chelsea tradition to write off our chances. And the fact that it came from the Chelsea manager, like, I think it's one thing fans trying to keep a lid on expectation. Maybe they don't want to set themselves up to be ridiculed or whatever. I think it's atrocious that the Chelsea manager said we're not contenders for the league. Like, if we're not, why not? And if we're not, should you be the manager?
How frustrated were you about the fact that they've gone out of the FA Cup, considering that it wasn't necessarily the strongest team that Enzo Maresca could have put out? How frustrating did you find that? That seemed a bit baffling to me, just given that, obviously he wasn't going to know about some of the teams that went out this weekend, but Chelsea, especially with Arsenal out, we knew that Liverpool weren't going to be that strong in this competition in terms of the side they put out. All right, it's a shock that they lost to Plymouth, but do you not feel that this was a good chance for Chelsea to try and kick on in a competition?
Of course. Like, I'm very proud of the tradition at Chelsea that we always focus on cup competitions. It isn't like that at every club. I don't think it has to be like that at every club. But our approach to cup competition has been one of always love, always loyalty, and always taking it seriously. Like, when Arsenal were playing Fran Moreda in the cup or whatever, we never did that. And that's their tradition, and fair play to them, but ours is not there. Jose Mourinho would always go for the jugular in that competition, was always desperate to win it, saw it as a foundation to winning more silverware, and invariably that was proved correct. So I think that we should always value the cup. Like, when we went 25 years without a trophy as a club, when we bounced back to win the FA Cup in 1997, Di Matteo's goal against Borough, and Eddie Newton, like that, it's one of the best days I've ever had following football. Like, genuinely, one of the best days. In 1994, when we got beat in the cup final by United, David Ellery's fault, it's one of the worst. Like, these competitions matter to us. So for Enzo Maresca to kind of come in and go, well, I'm not too bothered about either cup competition, by the way. Think about what happened at St James's Park.
Yep.
He's
fielded the B-side.
Have a little bit of respect for the tradition of the club that you are going into. Like, it isn't just about him going, I don't know, I won't be defined by the cup competitions. My job is to get us into the top four, which he's going to fail at, by the way, but this is a different conversation. I think it's atrocious that he's effectively thrown both cup competitions.
I think you make a really good point as well about that top four race. Obviously, Chelsea at the moment sitting fourth, but Manchester City just behind them, Newcastle just behind that as well. Bournemouth could be a bit of a tough ask, but Forest don't really look like they're going anywhere. It's not as if it's an absolute guarantee, like you say, that Chelsea do end up in those positions as well. So then, once you get to the end of the season, if you're looking at a Chelsea side who bombed out of both cup competitions early on, won the Conference League, well, they shouldn't even be in that competition, in my opinion.
No, that isn't a real trophy for us.
That's not a good season for me.
It's really important that whilst I'm always somebody who says do not sneer at silverware, ever, and I love European competition, the Conference League isn't that. Like, the Europa League is. If you win the Europa League, I think it's amazing. One of the best nights of football I've ever been part of is Branislav Ivanovic scoring against Benfica in Amsterdam as we lifted the Europa League. We became the first and I believe only team to concurrently hold the Champions League and the Europa League for a week. History, right? Yeah. History. Your last-minute goal in Amsterdam. What more could you want? The Conference League ain't that. The Conference League, for it to be a record...
you shouldn't even be in it.
For it to be a recognised competition, it has to have recognised teams in it. There are teams in this competition I literally never heard of. Yeah. Like, literally never heard of. Like, and not teams from miles away. We played a German team I never heard of. Like, you know, what do you know about Hoffenheim? Right?
I don't think it was Hoffenheim.
Oh, Heidenheim.
It wasn't Hoffenheim.
Heidenheim.
I know a lot. They're a good team.
Heidenheim.
That was.
Do you know? Yeah. Like, I don't know anything. And like, we played teams from Ireland. All due respect.
Yeah.
That isn't a prestigious cup competition for Chelsea. So no, I think Enzo Maresca is getting it all wrong. I don't think he's the man for the job, really. But I also think that there's so much going on at the club that there's no point in changing the manager.
What in particular do you think that he's getting wrong on the pitch at the moment?
I think his conduct off it more. Look, on the pitch, I don't think he's a very good manager. I think he makes massive mistakes. Substitutions don't affect games. He constantly picks players who I don't necessarily think should be picked. Has loyalty to players that they don't deserve. Seems to freeze out players that I believe could do a job. Like, just gets it wrong. Gets it massively wrong. Isn't a very good manager. But the conduct off the pitch is like just so not in keeping with the Chelsea spirit. Like saying that we aren't in a title race. Could you imagine if he said that and Roman Abramovich was chairman? Like, that's not our tradition. Like, what do you mean we're not in a title race? Like, to throw domestic competitions. That just isn't us. To disrespect players that do mean a lot to us. It's, you know, in the lights of say Trevor Chalobah, who he throws out, Ben Chilwell.
What about, you know, obviously there's the famous quote from Mourinho saying you were a little horse, you weren't ready to win the title.
There was a mistake though, and that was partly when it went wrong. Look, there were lots of mistakes made by. If Roman Abramovich had got it right, we should have won double what we won in that era, like double. Like, we sacked Mourinho in 2007. Like, what's he doing? Like, what's he doing? 3 years later, he went to Inter and won a like, why is he not doing that at Chelsea? Like, why are we sacking Mourinho in 2007 off the back of back-to-back league wins, by the way? Because we had a dodgy result against Rosenborg or whatever. Like, loads of mistakes were made. But you can almost understand the mistakes because the motivation was to succeed. The motivation here just feels all over the place.
I think as well with Maresca and with what he says off the pitch as well. It's not just that comment about the title. I seem to remember, especially after the game against Crystal Palace, late draw for Crystal Palace. He kind of said, you know, it was during this festive period run. He kind of said, yeah, these runs happen. Yeah. That for me just feels wrong. All right, no. You can say that sometimes it might be your off day. You might not turn up as a side on one particular day. Your manager of Chelsea. Yeah. Sorry, it's not acceptable.
I agree.
To have
and
runs
do you know
like
something else that he got massively wrong? And I was listening. I was like, "What are you talking about, you fool?" He was asked about how, who was the player that he was Robert Sanchez. It was put to him about how many points Robert Sanchez cost us. And in order to justify the selection of Robert Sanchez, you know what he did? He basically threw some of our better players under the bus in order to justify his selection of a very average goalkeeper.
He picked out defenders.
Yeah, so it was put to him, why do you keep picking Robert Sanchez after making more mistakes than any other goalkeeper in the Premier League? And he went, oh, you think our keeper makes mistakes? You've seen how many chances Nicholas Jackson misses? How many misplaced passes does Moises Caicedo make? You're throwing our team under the bus here. Yeah. Like, that's the way that an opposition fan would talk to me who was trying to have a pop about Chelsea players. They go, how many chances did Nicholas Jackson miss? He's our manager saying it.
Yeah. And also, the thing is, it's not even quantifiable, that, is it? Because a striker can miss chances, whereas a goalkeeper, the amount of times Robert Sanchez has thrown the ball in your net or made some error that has led to a goal...
Yeah, I mean, look, don't get me wrong.
Can't be sustainable as a goalkeeper anyway.
No, look, the goalkeeping situation is a disgrace at Chelsea, like a total disgrace. Do you know Matt Sells?
Yeah.
Do you know about the story? Did you know?
He played for Newcastle. He played.
But did you know that he also was? So I hate this. I'm not saying this with any love at all. I think it's an embarrassment. But multi-club models and all that.
Yeah.
You know, Matt Sells, one of the best goalkeepers in the league this season. You know, he was a Chelsea player in as much as being part of the Clear Lake.
Wow.
And we've got Robert Sanchez in goal, and like, it's just such shambles, isn't it?
That's the other thing that I just find amazing about the Sanchez situation is you've got about 90 keepers on your books anyway.
Including, at one point, within the framework of the club, one of the best goalkeepers in the league this season. I think the best goalkeeper in the league this season is probably Arsenal's keeper. Do you think that's fair?
It's either Sells or Raya, I would say.
Right, so if it's not Raya... we've got the best. And if it is, you know what I mean? Like, I don't.
Kepa's been pretty good.
Kepa's not had a bad time of it. I know.
Been pretty good.
I know.
At Bournemouth as well. I do think that there's a couple of issues, and I think that phrase of just the wheels starting to fall off a bit.
Well, we won't make the Champions League spot. Like we won't. The only way we do is if maybe Newcastle or Man City capitulate. Like say for some reason Newcastle. Say Newcastle win the League Cup and they make it into Europe that way. I think their domestic form could suffer. As we've seen loads of times with teams. It's like when teams are either safe from relegation or they're relegated. It affects things. Newcastle could make history in what, March? They can make history in March. I think that the amount of points that they accrue towards the end of the season will be affected if they were to make it into Europe already.
Because that's the I mean, the thing is, right, the other thing with Newcastle in particular is if you're right, so the final's March 16th, they lose that final to Liverpool. You look at that FA Cup at the moment as well, Chelsea out, Arsenal out, Liverpool out. Newcastle at the moment, with the bookies, by the way, I'm not just saying this as a fan, second best team in it.
Yeah.
They're the second best team in that competition. So
it could be in Newcastle's interest to become a great cup team this year in particular.
It's going to depend on the draws, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, if they're getting teams that they can beat and they're getting them at home, it could be they can rotate and still win.
But there's nobody left in the cup that Newcastle would be scared of.
No.
There's literally nobody.
No.
Like, you know, if Liverpool was still in it, you go, well, you wouldn't want to go to Anfield. No. Whereas I don't think there's anybody like that, is there?
No. Man City is still in it, but I mean, they're beatable. And Newcastle actually weirdly go to the Etihad next.
So if Newcastle make it into Europe or decide to focus on the cup, that could do Chelsea a massive favour in qualifying for the Champions League via the league table.
Yeah.
If Man City maybe end up focusing on the European Cups, but I think they'll make it into the top 4 or 5 anyway in Man City, don't you?
I'm not sure. I'm really not sure.
Don't you just think that there's enough goals in the team? Don't you think just Haaland's goals to finish above Chelsea? I just think they've got...
They're not great.
It's not about being great. It's about being better. It's not about being great, though.
Yeah.
You don't have to be great to finish in the top 5.
That's true.
It's about being better. It's about being in the top, 20% of the league?
Yeah.
They've got to be that.
Yeah, they've got to be. Surely. But I'm not sure. I think it's going to be very, very tight because, like you say there's other interest for all of those clubs, but actually with Chelsea now we're only really talking about the Conference League. So maybe without those distractions, they will make it into that top 5. But as we've already said, they're so inconsistent. They can't hang on to leads either. Can't hang on to leads.
We've got one of the worst back lines. Like, you know, if you did player for player, you look around at our back line and you're just like, no. You know, so many players are so average.
Oh, please clip up that sound. That was amazing.
No.
On AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.